Welcome back to another episode of the Innovate On Purpose podcast, hosted by Matt Mueller,
best-selling author of The Mindful Innovator and Rethink Retail's top retail expert.
We can help retail leaders find clarity so they can grow their businesses purposefully.
We will uncover mindful tips, innovative solutions, and purposeful leadership advice and strategies that you can apply immediately to your retail innovation. Are you ready to innovate on purpose?
Hey, before we jump into the episode today, I just wanted to say thank you for hitting the play button. You being here fires me up, and I cannot wait to share with you the insights that are going to make a difference in your business. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and leave a review so I can reach as many retail leaders as possible. They too need to hear this. Okay, let's do it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Innovate On Purpose, brought to you by the Mindful Innovator. My name is Matt Mueller. I am your host. And today we have a very big topic that has been sparking across the industry. Everyone's talking about these two things, and today we're going to bring them together to coalesce them. So CX, customer experience. Everybody is talking about customer experience and how do we evolve it for the next consumer coming in. And sustainability is another big topic that we talk about. So today we're going to talk about how does CX impact sustainability and sustainability impact CX. And to do that, we have somebody with a lot of great knowledge and wisdom within this subject, Mike Robinson. Mike Robinson was the EVP, formerly at Macy's, has become board of director in many different areas. His profile is so long, it was dizzy just reading it on LinkedIn. A founding member at the Eighth Notch, which sounds really amazing. And in fact, yesterday I had an experience that was just enlightening before we had the conversation today. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But Mike, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Happy to be here.
So let's start from a little bit further back. We'll definitely get into Eighth Notch and what you guys are doing, because I really love the story there. But tell me a little bit about your work history, being EVP at Macy's, and kind of how that led you to where you are today.
Yeah, it's a story that doesn't have a linear path to it, Matt. So I hope you don't mind if I wander through the wild a little bit. Yeah, I grew up in upstate Pennsylvania. I went to Penn State. I did a couple of internships with Johnson & Johnson in the consumer products space. So I knew that I like product, right? And I had a chance to move out to the West Coast with J&J and move from a finance role to an operations role, and help operate and learn manufacturing facility in the Pasadena area with the intent of moving that operation back to the East Coast. Learned it, didn't want to go back to the East Coast, and decided to stay in California and went into consulting. And consulting led me from a big five perspective to a smaller boutique here in the city, back to a big five. And throughout that, I kind of wandered through industries, high tech, biotech, and then I found retail. And retail, I didn't realize was my love, right? I didn't expect it to be. But once I understood the immediacy of the conversation that you have with the customer, it took that love of product that I had before, and then also the love of technology that I learned during my consulting career, to say that there's a better way and there's an interesting way. I was at the dawn of kind of the first stage e-commerce sites in the late 90s, and then ended up going into industry at the Gap when it was the second generation, as we're starting to think about moving away from just transactional, but starting to think about the customer experience associated with that. Help to re-platform, the Gap and the Gap brands, a business that is a fascinating one to watch as the stores would shrink. The e-commerce business would grow, and that was just, the channel growing, but also just a customer reacting to that experience. And then I got tapped on the shoulder and had a chance to go to Macy's, and it was as the head of technology for the e-commerce group. And for the first 3 years that I was there, that's what we did. We just continued to build out this channel. In the last 5 years, I actually moved from the technology seat into the business seat and owned the channel. And I stand on, the shoulders of giants in terms of that time frame, in terms of, people who were smart in giving us investment, smart in giving us the room to grow, and the ability to take a $700 million channel when I got there and a $7 billion channel, but by the time that I left. And a lot of it came down to customer experience, right? How could we make this better, especially as we were crossing the threshold into stores and trying to figure out omni-channel and create a seamless experience, and you add the mobile experience. 2010 to 2018 was a wild time period in terms of both growth of the business, the growth of the consumer experience, and also making every mistake in the book associated with that. I left Macy's in 2018 to start phase 2 of my career, which was startup advisory. I've done a series of advisories for startups in the customer experience space, and also took on a board position with Vista Outdoor, which is a large conglomerate of brands, the Camelbacks, the Bushnells, the Bell Giros, the Fox, in terms of how do you create opportunity for people to take these great products into the outdoors. And they wanted to grow from again, back to my original roots, from a consumer products company into a direct-to-consumer. So have been focused on that with them. And then in addition, Jamie Sapp, the founder, he tapped me on the shoulder, and Jamie and I have known each other for a long time. And he said, I got an idea for a company. And it really comes down to this notion of, final mile delivery is incredibly chaotic, and it isn't organized, and it isn't synchronized. And I think there's a business there. And if we do it at the final delivery address, there's an opportunity to then take concentric circles back and find a way of creating greater efficiencies all the way back to the moment that it starts its journey. And that's really the business that we're in right now.
I think we should start off with like the CX aspect of things. So like just thinking about the consumer experience, and yeah, I can only imagine what it was like between 2010 and 2018, putting this up, and because it was the Wild West and we didn't know what we were doing yet, right? When it came to, omni-channel, or it wasn't even a word yet, but it was like, going direct to consumer. How did you, from the technology side of the business, like control and be able to test the consumer experience within that role? Because it must have been so difficult.
We did a lot of test and learn. It was succeed by failure, right? In many cases, especially as you saw the devices start to proliferate, right? And you started to understand that the consumer was navigating from, a desktop at work to their mobile phone, on their commute, if they're not driving, to a tablet or a laptop at home, right? In terms of that entire journey. And they may start their shopping experience in the morning and conclude it in the evening, or vice versa, right? And being able to ensure that it was as seamless and as comfortable as possible. And I can tell you, we got it wrong a lot, right? It was, in some cases, the technology wasn't ready. The first mobile app that we ever built was awful, just terrible, right? It's now one that, when I left, was much, much better, and they've taken it even further since I was there. But we were fumbling in the dark. But that was the point, is that we were given space to fumble in the dark. And the best feedback you'll ever get is from customers. And so we did a lot of testing. We did a lot of listening. We did focus groups. We would go into the stores. We would talk to customers. We would ask them to try the experience. Once we crossed the lease line in, we were one of the first companies that tried, self-checkout through an app, right? Which I can tell you was not good, but we got it better, right? And, store navigation, trying to do personalized offers, as a person starts to move through their life and their day. So again, a lot of it was experimentation, but the point is that we never gave up. And I always credit the people that I worked with of, every time they got knocked down, they got back up and they tried again. And that was one of the things that I think that was indicative of my 8 years at Macy's, which was we were willing to test, we were willing to learn, but we were also willing to fail, but then move forward from that. And that to me was incredibly encouraging and actually fueled the entire organization.
That's awesome. Yeah, you have to have that that ability to be willing to fail. And a lot of times we do hold ourselves so tight to the goals that we have that we don't give ourselves any leniency to try new things. And it's amazing that you were one of the first to actually try a mobile checkout. That's huge. And
yeah.
It must have been really scary. Like, what was that like when you started that project to say, hey, we're going to test this thing out? Like,
absolutely terrifying, because if you think about, a Macy's store, it has a lot of doors, right? And it has a lot of redcoats who are there to stop shoplifting, right? So all of a sudden you've got a customer that is sitting there saying, so you want me to check out on my phone and then just walk out, right? And I'm going to get stopped like the other person that got stopped. It was tough. And I think that led to the adoption. Also, I think we may have overestimated our ability to change the mindset of an older customer as well, right? I mean, we have Macy's was very stratified, but definitely much more 40 and above. And so, those people like service, right? And more importantly, that they like the game of the grand bargain, which is they get to check out and they figure out with that fistful of coupons how much savings that they can get. And the associate loved it as well, which is why you would always see these long lines, because people were trying to arbitrate as much as they could. So it was breaking some norms, that there was a certain percentage that appreciated. But I think the thing that I always appreciated about the Macy's leadership team from Terry on down was give it a shot, try it. You still need to meet your financial objectives, Mike, right? And we're going to invest, but we need you to innovate, right? And that was super encouraging for me for a very storied, many would say stodgy department store, right? In terms of take a chance. And we built a very strong engineering team, lots of partnerships here in the Valley. We were on the verge of being the first ones to accept Apple Pay because of a relationship that we had with Apple, and the timing just didn't work in that holiday period. But there were so many things that we tried that have become the standard now, that I think that we were early adopters on, and it was learn to be scared, and learn to be scared that it's okay to be scared.
Yeah, you mentioned before too, like just never giving up, but there are sometimes where you do have to kind of give up on a concept, like just thinking about the mobile checkout in the store. That's not something that Macy's went forward with, right?
They shuttered it. I think it's one of those things that I think Macy's will always play around with, right? Just because that there may be an opportunity. And it also may be that you do it with a more loyal customer as well, right?
Yeah.
Right. It becomes a higher service level. But yeah, I mean, it's a really, really tough thing to get right, right?
It's like, what is the right time to shutter it down? Like that's like, when should you kind of just say, okay, this isn't working, let's put this aside and focus somewhere else?
You measure adoption, right? And at some point, the juice isn't worth the squeeze at that point, right? If there's a significant amount of maintenance associated with it, or the experiment has shown that it didn't work, and you don't really have the right next tweak to be able to do, to take on with it. I would think, another example is visual search, right? Everybody rushed to visual search, right? And I think it's an incredibly low adopted opportunity. I mean, Google has tried to push that very much at the search engine model, right? Not just at the, Amazon tried to do it with Firefly, right? So and every once in a while, I'll give it a shot somewhere and see and every once in a while I'm surprised and delighted, right? But it's not that highly adoptable, right? I think natural language search, right? In terms of being able to speak to your phone. I think it's just now we're starting to get comfortable with Gen AI assistants, right? To be able to do that. I don't think the technology was good enough early on, right? You just couldn't ingest enough data in order to give, valuable enough output that it made something where somebody said, that's the only way I'm going to do it now, instead of thumb typing. So I think, I think so many of those ideas in that period were just maybe offset by a few years, right?
Yeah.
And I look back at that and say, if we had Gen AI at that point, holy crap, right? I mean, that there's a significant number of things. And I got to believe that people are struggling with that right now in terms of the opportunity size associated with what do I do in a Gen AI world?
Yeah, absolutely. Man, it is funny how we kind of have these ideas and we have to wait a little bit longer for technology to catch up for it to actually kind of fully go through. And of course, change is difficult for consumers, no matter the age. So it's just getting them to adopt. It takes time, especially if there's any friction at all. So you have to offer that 10 times the value for them to want to really even change. Like, it has to be 10 times better. Otherwise, don't even bother.
It has to be 10 times, and at least in a large organization like Macy's as well, it had to be something that spoke to the people internally as well, right?
Yeah.
You got to drink your own champagne, right? And if you weren't drinking your own champagne, there's probably a chance it's not a great feature.
Yeah. The last question on Macy's, like right now they're working through some Store of the Future stuff. I think they have 50 of them that were launched last year. And they're doing pretty well. They're smaller formats, and more about customer service. Like, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give leadership there today to say, hey, this is what needs to be in the Store of the Future? If you're not thinking about X, you're missing the mark.
Yeah, I think it's the store as the hub of the brand, right? How do I do everything there, right? How do I pick up? How do I return? How do I make it as frictionless as possible? How do I get full assortment, even though it's a limited assortment? That's in the store. I think Tony's strategy, and Tony Spring is a is the perfect person to take over at Macy's, right? Because his Bloomingdale's experience helps on that higher end service, right? He's also curating differently as well, right? That they've always wanted to edit the assortment. The easiest way to edit the assortment is give them a smaller box, right? If you give them a smaller, because Macy's stores are cavernous, right? And you got to fill them up or it just looks silly, right? So I think going to that smaller store format, going to a more exclusive assortment, trying to figure out the service profile, but making it the hub of the brand, I think it's a really, really strong strategy. I think also Tony, from my past experience with working with him, understands that technology doesn't solve everything, right? There's a human aspect to this as well. If they can, and the thing that I've always felt about Gen AI is that, it is the greatest opportunity to do human augmentation. How do you make the associate? It was rare that we ever made the associate smarter than the customer. Customer always came in better informed. I think they can flip that. And if they can flip that where the associate is better informed, right? In terms of what is on trend, what's available, what can I get for you?
Yeah.
Based on what I know about you as an individual, what might I suggest? I think they can change that. But they've also shrunk the service model so much that it has to fit a smaller box anyways.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be my suggestion.
That's a great thought. Yeah. Arming the employees with the right information to provide that such a superior service is totally within reach right now. I mean, just having consumer loyalty data, you know exactly who's coming into your store. You can tie that to the associates behind the register or on a sales floor, and they know exactly what to serve up, creating a personalized experience, like they are best friends and they don't even know each other.
I mean, I think about this in terms of how I'm treated by Delta right now, right? Delta's doing a wonderful job of this. Now, granted, I'm a 1,000,000-mile flyer and a diamond medallion on them, right? So I'm a very worthy or a very high value customer to them. But they greet me by name. They come to my seat. They've solved a problem the other day without me even asking. They called me because they were changing a flight and gave me a benefit associated, even though they were moving me up on schedule and getting me in earlier. I mean, there were all kinds of things that I think they're starting to understand based on a loyal customer. How do I treat them a little bit differently? But also, how do I anticipate so they won't ask for something? I've been very, very surprised by how the airlines are approaching this.
Yeah. It's like what do they say? Under promise, over deliver, right? So just
That's right.
It's awesome that they're over delivering. That's great. Well, Mike, I definitely want to move the subject over a little bit here. So we got covered CX, kind of store of the future type stuff. Now I want to think just even a little bit further into the future and talk about the eighth notch. Because in fact, it was funny. Yesterday, I was driving home after I was preparing for this interview today. And as I was driving back to the house, I noticed on my block an Amazon truck that was dropping off a package on the left side of my block. And then about 15, 20 feet up past that, there was a driver on an Amazon truck that was getting out to deliver to the right side of the block. And I was like, what in the world is going on? Like, why are there two Amazon trucks here? Like, this makes no sense. Mike, tell me about eighth notch and exactly how you guys are fixing sustainability within the retail industry.
Yeah. And that's encouraging to hear, because I think that we all think that Amazon is the smartest company in the world, right? And if they haven't solved it, then maybe, but it's something I know that they're solving. So the origin story, and I mentioned Jamie Sapp, who was the founder. Jamie lives in a suburb of San Francisco, and I was over at his house and we were out for a walk and had a very similar experience to what you just described, with delivery trucks going up and down his suburban, neighborhood street. And he looked at me, he said, does that make sense to you? And I go, no. And he goes, does that happen on your street in the city? I go, absolutely. And he goes, I think there's a better way of doing that. I want to build a business around that. And from that was born the eighth notch, which was, how do we figure out a way of synchronizing delivery so the two Amazon trucks become one, right? In our case, we're not working with Amazon. They're working with one of the two largest package carriers in the US. You could figure out who it is. You'd flip a coin. You'd be right half the time, wrong half the time. I just can't mention them, but how do we minimize the number of times that truck stops in front of Mike Robinson's house? And instead of stopping here 3 days a week, it stops here 1 day a week, right? But still drops off everything. Don't change the pattern of consumption, right? But change the pattern of delivery. And the way that we do that is we sit in between, the shipper and the carrier, and we take information from the carrier of everything that's currently in flight going to every address in America. And we understand the orders that are coming from the retailer and saying, we see that you have an order going to an address that already has something in flight. When can we start its journey? So we would match as it works through the network into the final sort hub, into the back of the truck, into the arms of the delivery driver, and dropped on my doorstep. And we know that we can do that somewhere between 15 to 20% of the time. And that's either cross retailer, right, in terms of everything that comes to Matt's house or Mike's house, or inside the same retailer because it's split shipments, right? And they've got inventory coming from from different locations. Being able to synchronize that, causes the removal of what is called in the industry a delivery stop. An increase in delivery density, right? More packages dropped off at the same time removes a delivery stop. And every time that stop is removed, there's a multi-dollar savings, operational savings. In addition to that, there's also 800 grams of CO2 that is never created because that truck didn't need to start, move, stop again. And both of those are things that we've worked with the carrier to figure out a three-way gain share model where the retailer gets a piece as an incentive, right, to change their behavior and change the date of when they start the journey. The carrier keeps a large portion and we get a piece because we created the opportunity. And as I mentioned, 15 to 20% of the time, it varies based on retailer, it varies based on industry, it varies when it's a B2B versus B2C situation. Greater than 10% of the time, we can find a match that will take cost and carbon out of the system and start to change the dynamics of what a final mile delivery looks like.
That's amazing, Mike. That is like low hanging fruit, definitely, just because you see those trucks passing by each other every single day. So that there's a lot of different directions I can go with this. But I guess one is like, can you tell me a little bit about like adoption with retailers? Like how has that been selling into retailers and saying, hey, this is a new way that you can deliver? What's that reception been like?
It's the great question. I think has been the long pole in our history, right? Building the technology wasn't that hard, right? And proving that the opportunity was there because every retailer that we work with, we will do simulation on it. We'll take live data as if it was live and then take a look at the opportunity to build the business case around it. And it really comes down to that same band, somewhere between 10 and 20, 15 and 20%. But it's been changing the mindset of you're now telling me I'm going to ship later, which means which means my delivery is going to be further out. That seems counter to what most companies are being said is that they have to speed up to match Amazon. But here's the argument that I have for that. You go, the next time you check out on Amazon isn't trying to get something to you fast unless they've already got something coming nearby you, right? It surprises me that you saw 2 Amazon trucks, but my guess is they were coming from 2 different DCs in order to do that. I think, if it's fast, they're doing it because it's operationally valuable for them. But they're going to ask you and say, hey, wouldn't it be great if you actually did something for the planet, right? And have it delivered at this time, and it'll be considered more sustainable because either something else is coming to you or something is coming to your neighbor, right? They're very specific in their messaging. So, my contention is that Amazon is already starting to condition the customer that waiting is okay, right? Where before it was fast and free, what was okay. Then it became fast and paid because Prime is no longer a free program. Now it's becoming around Prime allows you to do things in a coordinated, synchronized fashion, right? And you're getting the benefit of you're leaning in on sustainability. We're trying to bring that same capability to the rest of the retailers. That's been the long pole, is breaking through that mindset. And also that there are some internal to the warehouse questions as well, like pick optimization and things of that nature. But I'll tell you that once we go live, that 15 to 20% trade out of date on a daily basis normalizes after about a week or two. And then it becomes transparent, right? And then it's just hands off and it becomes, are you optimizing to the level that we're telling you to?
Yeah. So if you think of like the average retailer, if they were to go on this system, like how much does it really delay the packaging, like the package coming to the home?
The premise that we always live within is the customer promise window. If you made a commitment that it'll be there between 3 to 5 days, we'll use the back part of that, right, in order to be able to find the value. And we never go beyond that. So So I think this notion that many retailers have grown, and I found, and I fell prey to this as well. I'm going to surprise and delight the customer, right? I'm going to get it there faster. And I would look at it as a Macy's employer and it's like, why are we doing this, right? Because I didn't ask for it any faster. There was no value to it. It was just, they just chose to rush it through the system and get it to me because the inventory was close. Versus what we're saying is take advantage of the time that you've already committed to and use it more strategically to be able to create other value. And, I think the way that we're also looking at this and we're counseling retailers that we're working with is where we live right now is in the post-checkout part of the process. So the decision has already been made. You can ask this question at checkout, right? Would you like a more sustainable shipping option? And enlist the customer and tell them that you're going to do this. And I think that's where we're going to see the adoption, right? I think this is, part of the conscious consumerism shift that we're starting to see with people, right? It's not just the materials and I wear this hoodie as a reminder because it's bamboo and it's renewable, right? And I think about it, and it was marketed to me by this company, and they said, we know you have a sustainable mindset, and I bought it. And then they said, and we're going to get it to you really fast, right? They missed that last piece. If they had said, and we're going to get it to you in a week from now, we're going to use the most sustainable option to be able to get it there, that's a home run, because that completes the brand conversation.
Yeah, that's so smart. Absolutely. Now, like, talking about consumers and going more to being conscious about sustainability, you're definitely seeing that. And like some of the research that I've read and kind of worked on has always said like where consumers expect their brands to be sustainable. So that's like, but they don't want to make that selection to be sustainable. They want you to make that selection for them to be sustainable. So it's really interesting how consumers are really starting to look for that piece of it and how it's really important for us to be adding that to our brands. I think one of the most biggest challenges that we have is marketing that, right? So how do we wave our flag to consumers? Hey, we're sustainable. Like, it's like, how do you get that message out there to consumers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure many companies are doing it well, right? I don't know if they've figured out how to monetize sustainability, right? But once they do, they will. I think part of it is it's a really interesting question because climate change has become a political third rail, right? In many cases. And if we can figure out how to not make it political and just say, it's just better for everyone if we use less stuff, right?
Yeah.
And this is a question of using less stuff. And maybe, someone doesn't necessarily believe that we're changing the climate, but isn't using less stuff just better, right? And it isn't efficiency better. And I think that's the piece that attracted me to this more than anything else, Matt, was I wasn't asking for carbon offsets. I wasn't asking to change over to, EVs. I wasn't saying that you have to power your hubs with solar, which is massive PP&E, investments. But it was just take this inherent inefficiency and make it more efficient. Because, I did a podcast about a month ago and we started riffing on the same topic and the gentleman went, from synchronizing delivery at the doorstep to smart cities. And then he was saying, now it's about children's safety as well. My kids can play in the street again, right? And it was this interesting conversation of just the realm of the possible of if we just remove vehicles, right? That's what my goal is. I want to get trucks off the road, right? I don't want to change your consumption pattern. I don't want you to tell you to buy less. I'll let you determine what you want to buy. But if you choose to allow us, we'll just bring it to you in a different pattern so that everything is showing up at the same time. And we're just using less resources in order to get.
Yeah, that the efficiency makes total sense. And I don't see that being that big of an ask, right? Just
I would hope, Matt, right? I think I want to believe that we're going to return to rational conversation on this topic. I can tell you the fact that we offer financial savings first and carbon savings as a gift with purchase, right?
Yeah. Yes.
That makes this really, really interesting for retailers, right? They look at that and say, one of my biggest line items is getting product to the customer that bought it from me. And it's a race to the bottom as the carrier costs go up. The carriers look at it and say, I've got to take costs out of my process. I can't keep building more and more hubs and buying more planes and buying more trucks to keep up with the growth of e-commerce. Well, if I can gain 10% efficiency network wide, it's hundreds of millions of dollars of savings that then then filters through. And that to me that's the efficiency play And then we add the component of sustainability. And isn't it great that we're also taking carbon out?
Absolutely. And that's part of a lot of our company's initiatives, right? Their strategies is to be more sustainable, is to lower their carbon footprint. So it totally makes sense. But I love that you're leading with the operational savings, which is a no-brainer. We always want to optimize our business. So it's
Should,
yeah, right?
right?
I hope so. Yeah. So I guess last question I want to get down to is looking at the future of consumer experience and sustainability in like 5-10 years from now. Where do you see all this going? How is retail going to transform?
Yeah, I mean, if I had that crystal ball, I'd be a rich man in 5 years. But I think it's going to come down, and we've hit on a couple of the pillars that I always think about, which is that the consumer is growing much more conscious of their choices, and so they're going to be more mindful, and they're going to vote with their wallet differently around those companies that I think are being more efficient and more mindful and more thoughtful. I think the role of generative AI is going to help in that. I think it's going to help guide the consumer. If we don't find a way to mess AI up, right, and bias it in some cases, and bias it towards consumption versus bias it towards helping, right, and assisting, I think there's a real opportunity there. And and I've used assistants myself, just planning trips and finding things that I needed and getting things that I didn't even realize that I would have needed before. And I don't think it was trying to, get me to buy something because it was just to buy. It was being helpful in terms of these are things that you hadn't thought about. And then I think the last thing, and it goes back to that efficiency conversation, is I think we're going to enter into a great period of mass customization, right? Right. Getting things that are good for Matt, but they're done with a mass production process, right? But it fits you, it suits you. Because what you may need may be very different than what I would need, but trying to get to bespoke, is super, super hard and super expensive. But I think we're going to get to a point where we're buying better. And I think we're buying better because of that mass customization. So I think that those are the three things that I look at. And I think all of them come back to, if Gen AI doesn't get polluted and if it continues down the road, and I don't want to go down the Skynet conversation. I could do that at any point, but if it's there from an assistant standpoint and it's a really smart assistant, then I'm going to make better choices.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, the future could definitely be bright with the tools and technology that we have and the direction that we're moving. And I love what the Eighth Notch is doing to be a part of that. So it's been awesome. Like, anything else you want to leave the audience with before we end our episode today?
No, I'll just leave with the closing comment I do on every podcast. If you're interested in hearing more, please reach out to me. I'm Robinson at T8Notch, NOTCH.com. Our website is T8Notch.com. We're on LinkedIn. Connect to us, follow us, because we're documenting our journey on that. But if you want to jump aboard this pirate ship, now is the time to do it.
All right, ahoy, matey. Let's get people on that pirate ship. I'll put this information in the show notes as well, so everyone has it right there to take a look at and to get in touch with you. But Mike, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. It's really important for the planet. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We have made it to the end of another episode. Thank you for tuning in. A couple of things before you go. If you have found value in this episode, I am sure you'll find value in what we have coming up. So please subscribe so you will have access and know when we launch the next episode. Also, leave a review. The more reviews we have, the further our reach becomes, and I truly want this to be heard by as many leaders as possible. Don't hog this all for yourself. I would love to hear your insights on this topic, so meet me on social media at Matt Mueller Innovation on LinkedIn and Instagram. And lastly, if you want to learn more about my story and what I can do for you and your company, go to themindfulinnovator.com. I would love to help you innovate on purpose. Until next time, just remember, bring a level of awareness to each conversation, each observation, each moment, and you can create great change in this world. Thank you.